Hey everyone, welcome to episode 5 of the Mission Nutrition Devlog. It's been a while and I've done some work since the last time. I can now confidently say that we're on the late stages of making this game playable. We last saw each other like a month ago and I did a bit of everything since then. This week we're playing Soul Knight, and it would be out of place to not include this game in the series because it's the main inspiration for my game's mechanics. I've had Soul Knight on my phone for years now, and it's the only mobile game I've ever stuck with and still occasionally play. It's a roguelike that has a timeless game loop and a bunch of wacky weapons allowing different playstyles every run. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend to give it a try. So, let's start off with a bit of art. Although it was a low priority task, I made the main menu screen. It's the same background as the in-game one, it's just extended to fit the 16:9 ratio. I also drew a lot of random interesting planets. I avoided the space in the middle as that's where all the UI is gonna be. Next, I worked on the NPCs, and I forgot to turn on the time-lapse again. I wanted the first one to be a bit more humanoid, but I thought I'd stick with the evolutionary cavity stuff, so I gave them some instead of a mouth for communication. The second one is a kind of a stingray / horseshoe crab alien. I also sketched the dialogue frames to go along with these, and here's the final product that's transferred into pixelart. These were fairly big and they took me quite a while, especially the shading on the first one. I also made a quick little sketch of what's gonna happen when you land on a planet, when there will be more planets of course. You'll get this kind of flashcard that's gonna display some info about the planet, like the difficulty, which I'm currently thinking could be a 5-skull system. With that being said, this first planet we are working on won't be very difficult, most likely 2 skulls or maybe even 1. When you decide this planet is the one you want to play, there will be some kind of a continue button which is gonna give you the NPC flashcard. The NPC displayed is gonna be chosen at random. Moving on from art, we did the rest of the crucial animation. The only major thing left to do was animate the boss with 5 animations in total. First, I made the idle / walk animation. Nothing special, a little bop up and down as usual. The next 3 animations are all of his attacks. He was initially supposed to have 4, but I cut down on that for now, and I also reworked one of them, so let's go over them again. The first one I refer to as Shockwave. The boss will slam into the ground and send a linear shockwave into your direction. I tried to make all of the attack animations very distinct and add a lot of anticipation, specifically with these light yellow effects. I personally believe that reducing the anticipation to raise the difficulty is a really shitty game design, and because it essentially boils down to your success being RNG based. Instead, I want to focus on making the attacks faster and making them harder to dodge when I design harder planets. This was the only attack I tried to simulate in the preview, by the way, so this is how it could look in-game. The second attack is Barrage, which was reworked. Initially this was supposed to be a complicated attack where the boss would lock onto your position and do a half circle around you, shooting 4 turbo bullets in the process. By turbo bullets I mean large bullets that split into smaller ones after they pass some distance. Instead he will simply aim at you and shoot 3 turbo bullets in your general direction with no movement involved. The last attack is Storm, where the boss stands in place and shoots a turbo bullet into the sky, outside of your view. After a moment, a bunch of shadows will generate randomly across the map, which will serve as the warning. After another moment, bullets will crash down onto those shadows, so your goal is to not stand in any of them. The last animation here is the shockwave effect, which will not only be used for the shockwave attack, I'll also reuse this in other parts of the level, like when the boss enters the arena or for the cannon mob's attack. And finally, I couldn't keep postponing coding forever, so I started my Godot journey. The reason I decided to start with Godot is because the only language I know is Python and GDScript is very similar. Because of the recent Unity drama, Godot is getting a lot more popular. Even Brackeys, the man himself, came back and started making Godot tutorials, which is incredibly helpful. The engine is also quite simple for beginners, or so I've heard. It works on a node-based system, so you create scenes which are composed of nodes, and to make these nodes work, you can change their parameters and attach scripts to them. Needless to say, I'm gonna be using tutorials for 90% of my work, which is how I started out. First things first, I figured out the basics and tried to make the character movement. It didn't work at first, but I managed to make it work eventually. Next, I did the animation through animation state machines. This was a lot to take in, as is basically everything in the engine, but it's a pretty steep learning curve, and even after a couple of days, I'm already much more comfortable. I'm not gonna bother explaining how most of this stuff works, as I don't understand like half of it myself, but a simple way to put it, a state machine essentially tells its parent object when to play a specific animation when certain conditions are met. My character only needs 4 animations in total and has 2 states/conditions. The first state is the idle state and the second one is the is-moving state. After you define these conditions, you need to write some code that basically tells the state machine how to work. So since I need the idle animation to play when the character is not moving, I made an if statement saying that when the velocity is 0, the idle state becomes true, which sets off the idle animation in the state machine, and the reverse is also true. The next thing I did was the map, which was much simpler than I imagined. I just pasted the image into the engine. A map needs collisions of course, otherwise you could just leave. So I drew a polygon collider around the island. I then gave the player a collider as well, so now the map has successful bounds. I then set up the camera by simply giving my character a camera 2D node. After this, I made the gun, which led to some hilarious bugs like my gun spinning in place uncontrollably, or my gun running away from the map. I'm actually disappointed I forgot to screen record these. The goal here was to have the gun pasted onto the player and have it rotate based on where you are aiming. I didn't want the gun to do a full 360 though, I wanted it to flip horizontally when it's facing left. At first, the gun would work as intended when you stood at the origin point, but after moving, the gun would start to aim at the map center instead of your cursor. Damien helped me a bunch with this, and with the help of some tutorials we eventually got it to work properly. Since I was already a bit more familiar with making characters, I set up all of the mobs to be ready for coding. I gave them colliders and prepared all of their animations. I also wanted to mention that I finally chose my interview date, which is set to the 8th of July. So we have about a month to finish the prototype, but I'd like to have it done by the end of June, as I also need to put together my portfolio and enjoy the holidays. This week I need to get a lot of work done. My current biggest priority is to do the player shooting and enemy behavior, and if these don't take too long, I'm gonna move on to either the boss encounter or to the player UI. Anyways, that's it for today. I'd appreciate if you left a like, comment and subscribe, as that would really motivate me to keep doing these devlogs. And see you guys in episode 6.